Indeed.
Doesn't bode well, does it? If you suddenly see a lot of people in the chat.
I was going to type hello, Cuz, but yeah, Cuz is already in the.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already in the thing. We've
You're
already
here.
said our hellos. Yeah.
Just do it with words. Hello,
Yeah.
Cuz.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We've got snow outside. Yeah. I mean, it's December. It's almost Christmas. But yeah, 2 inches of snow in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Let's leave the C word out, Andy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
You mean you're not ready for
close
it?
enough. We're close enough now.
I have bought the one important present. I bought Black Friday because I knew what I was after. That's done. Everything else sort of happened when it happens.
Was that for you?
No. I'd made the decision and discussion with the wife a couple of days before and went, right, this is what we're going to get. And then it happened. Black Friday happened. Got a good bargain. Job done. I don't need to do anything else now.
Very good.
I was doing well till lunchtime today when I got whammed. Driving to the in-laws and it came on the radio. Yeah.
See, the trick there is never put the radio on in the car. Use podcasts, especially if you're 200 episodes behind.
Yeah.
I did say post before
I keep adding podcasts to my list and not taking any off.
Yeah.
The problem is I've got this one on my list, so I've got to do 1,000 mile a month if I'm going to do that.
Well, we've got an episode next week, and we're going to take a fortnight off, so that folk can catch up. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. We can take a rest, and folk can catch up. So
we'll give them 2 weeks over the busiest time of the year to try and catch up on something that's going to take 2 years to catch up on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to Maker's Waffle. that is, yeah.
The podcast where we start with an apology every week.
Well, yeah. Well, this is episode 80, which I think is darned impressive, as it is. Just I don't know what
the fact that we've still got listeners. You mean?
Well, they're still going. Yeah, I don't know if we've got listeners. We must have listeners. It says 4 in the thing. It could be us 4, of course. But there's a couple of people in the side chat. According to Anchor, we have about 100 listeners, which I think is humbling. I
can't even think of 100 people that we know. That's not true.
I can say
there's at least 2 of you not listening.
Erasmus,
Steve.
So I think they're the only 2 that I know for definite are listening.
Yeah. 2/3 was interesting today. There was part that was interesting. I can't remember what it was now, but at one point I was going to stop and actually kind of message Rasmus about something, but then I got distracted, so it didn't happen. I'm not going to go back and re-listen, but it was definitely funny.
I always get that every so often. I'll think, I should message him about this, and then I remember it was a podcast from 6 months ago. So it's like maybe
it's very similar when you message Steve as well, even if it's a podcast from 6 hours ago. But the sod's got me back a few times when he's sent me a message about something like a day or so later, and I've kind of gone, oh yeah, now I see what you meant when, especially if it's like a 2-hour episode that we've just waffled about and you're picking out 12 words that I said.
It's the downside to a community that's full of ADHD, isn't it? You just
squirrel.
Yeah. I'd love to do some research into that. I really would.
Could you imagine trying to pin down makers long enough to get them to answer questions?
Well, I'm actually focusing on it myself long enough to actually get it done.
Sit down still and answer these things.
I mean, surely we could find some university graduate who's got a PhD or a dissertation topic to do and just say, research this. I mean, there's someone out there.
We're too broken to do it. You do it.
Yeah, we're too broken. You do it. You've obviously.
We can give you a list of names.
In dribs and drabs over the next 4 months when we remember.
We'll promise you a list of names.
Yeah.
Sign up for this Facebook
just
group.
go to my Instagram, Facebook. Our Instagram friends list, rather. Yeah. So, episode 80, as is often the norm, but isn't quite the norm because there have been
A
a
loose
couple of
goal, I
differences.
think it's
Loose
kind
goal
of-
is to kind of have a group chat rather than just a waffle. And I've as anyone who's listened to Maker's Waffle more than 2 or 3 times will know, kind of STEM education is still a important. I want to say focus. I'm not sure focus is the right word, but maybe focus. It's certainly something that keeps my attention a lot of the time. It's something I am tutoring now. I am an examiner now, and I still try and keep myself up to date. Maybe not with active classroom practice because that's difficult without being actively in a classroom, but certainly up to date with kind of practices and what's happening in the kind of the world of STEM education. Maybe not quite as much as when I was working full time in it because I have other distractions now. But I want to something I've been thinking about for quite a long time now is to actually have some of these group chats where we actually kind of address some of the issues, not necessarily directly aiming at the sort of the S of STEM, but aiming at the sort of STEM in general, particularly where it intercepts with the maker community, and looking at that from a point of view of actually where it intercepts with the normal mainstream education system, and not to look at necessarily the shortfalls because that's easy to get into a rants and there's lots of stuff and it's A, it's politics, and B, often it's down to money as much as anything, but to kind of look more at some of the sort of positive things. So we've got two today. We've got Kaz and Alan, both previous guests, both who work in the STEM field. They can sort of tell us a little bit more about their kind of work specifically, maybe in a couple of minutes. And both of whom do work with trying to improve sort of the STEM agenda, STEM relations with the mainstream sort of schooling system. We've also already got, but obviously when we say things about the future, obviously it's always very not likely to change, but could change. But episode 90, potential for change. Episode 90, we have currently got booked in the complete team from Kids Invent Stuff, all 3 of them. So that's again a similar sort of thing. They're actively working in STEM engagement. I think that's going to be an interesting chat. Episode after that will be 100, which happens to coincide with Maker Central. Watch this space on that one. Don't know. I haven't got anything planned yet for 110, 120, but I would like to actually kind of maybe continue this chat with a variety of people over maybe some of the next year, not all of the next year in terms of the group chats, but certainly some of them, because I think it's a massive field to sort of investigate, and there are some amazing people doing some amazing things.
Yeah,
some of whom obviously are paid to do it, some of whom are actively, it is their focus, but some who do it incidentally, which is kind of where Cuz and Alan fits in, really, I think. So what might be best is if perhaps, let's do it alphabetically. Al, you want to go first? Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the company you work for and some of the things then that you have been doing kind of in terms of STEM. I'm going to call it STEM engagement, but I think this is something I've been racking my brains around actually for quite a few months now, because I started off with STEM. I've been involved in the STEM agenda as a teacher since about, obviously as I was teaching from 1996, but I was actively involved in the STEM agenda in terms of working with other organizations, councils and the like, local authorities, from about 2002, 2003. And that's been something then that I maintained until I finished teaching. So that was kind of, it was always, STEM was always the thing, that was the name that kind of you started getting pushed. I'm now kind of much more, I think actually since I finished teaching and got involved more in the maker community, kind of, I think STEAM is kind of something that needs to be thought of more. There's a big discussion about that. I know it's very controversial amongst some. And then there's also, I think there's room in there, in that STEAM, for that second M of makers. And I don't know actually whether that needs to be there, whether it actually gets encompassed by the other ones. But I think the power of the maker community, the strength of the maker community, I think there's a possibility for that. So it's kind of, when I say STEM, I'm generally kind of thinking
the most widely accepted term,
Steam with another M.
Yeah.
Meets. I can't come up with a good acronym yet, or good alternative.
I think the issue with all of the above really is they're pigeonholes to allow for funding pots to be distributed easier. At the end of the day, they're skills in all shapes and forms. And and
they're massively overlapping too.
Yeah, I mean we've got some incredible marketers at work who are very good at teaching a lot of these science and technology skills, particularly around engineering and electronics, and obviously that's the sort of field we're in. So I don't think you can pigeonhole anyone like that.
Don't know you.
Yeah, so sorry. I work for a company called Tech Buyer. We refurbish old IT equipment, essentially. So we started off in enterprise equipment, so servers, switches, blades, all the kind of stuff you'd find in a back office or a data center. And then I joined 3 years ago, and they brought me in to help manage the ITAD division. So we're responsible for data wiping and helping companies manage their sort of GDPR responsibilities in the case of all their old IT equipment. So we essentially shoulder that burden for them. They'll sign everything over to us, and we'll guarantee that no data leaves our building one way or another. But the thing I really like about Tech Buyer, our CEO Kev Towers was in the right place at the right time when he chose this industry and the refurbished aspect of it. But equally, he thoroughly believes in it and supports it. It's not a general nod to sustainability as you're getting with a lot of big companies nowadays. It's been there since day one for him when he was working out of his mum's garage. We're one of the first businesses our size to support the UN global goals. I don't know how much you guys know about global goals, but we're kind of chasing after goal 3 and goal 4 and goal 12. So they're good health and well-being. So general health and well-being of our staff, but also of wider community. That extends in a massive way to mental health as well as physical. Goal 4's quality education. So supporting our local schools, colleges, universities, and again, supporting our staff. We kind of turn it inwards as well and make sure people get the training they want, not just training they need. And then on top of that, we've got responsible consumption and production, which obviously we're perfectly positioned for in the reuse market. But the kind of company commitment to those goals is what's got me involved in the STEM side of things, because I'm on the committee, and a big chunk of what we look at, and literally monthly we'll sit down, we'll run through the goals, we'll see where we're at, and we've set some very specific targets around what we're looking for. And around education, we're looking at achieving 3 million in savings for educational institutions, whether that's through donation of equipment or teaching them how to put their equipment together better, achieve greater results with what they've got. But we've also committed to 5,000 hours of our time going towards achieving these goals. I went down to Bletchley Park about a month ago and spent a day there talking to classes of school children, showing them how to upgrade laptops, what the components were inside, why they all play a strong part. There were a team of 10 of us went down there. It was a fairly big commitment for a business who were paying all our wages. And, you know, they won't see a return from it beyond the fact that we're getting children interested in science and technology and the future. And then the third of the targets around education is donating 100,000 kilos, so 100 tons of technology to education bodies around the world.
Oh, wow.
So a big part of my push in the business with the ITAD division has been our waste product, you know, stuff that's not really fit for resale in the UK, but is still functioning and still viable product. We work with a charity called IT Schools Africa, and we send, you know, Pentium 4 desktops and that sort of thing that there isn't a resale market for in the UK. We'll send them across to Africa for use in schools there. And we've had to do a lot of soul searching around that, because you don't want to move our e-waste problem elsewhere. You know, just they don't necessarily have facilities in place to dispose of this kit when it does reach end of life for them. So we're now trying to figure out just how we can tie our network into theirs again, so that we make it a circular proposition. And, you know, when they are done with it, we know where the kit's going to go, and we help them sort the tail end of the process out. It's what I love about working there. You know, I don't want to sound too evangelical, but it's a
sales pitch for future employment.
Yeah, ultimately for a firm, there were 150, 200 staff when I started. 150, I think. We're now just over 300 worldwide. You know, and we are now worldwide. So it's grown, but it's not lost those initial aims. And if anything, they've only improved because there's now more brains to throw at it. You know, there's more people taking an interest. It's a good challenge.
Yeah, certainly sounds it.
Yeah,
sounds noble as well in that sense.
Yeah,
you know, it's doing the right things for the right reasons.
Oh, 100% selfish in my case. It gives me that rosy glow.
Yeah,
you know, it does. It makes you feel good, and that's exactly why I do it. You know, it's not completely altruistic.
I mean, you could argue nothing's completely altruistic, but that's probably a debate for another time.
Yeah, that's a different debate. Yeah.
That's probably going to need its own 10th episode one. Group special.
Gus, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment, and kind of what you're doing at the moment?
So I work for a startup space satellite company, and we build space satellite kits that are designed to be built by students in the UK. The idea being that we inspire them to follow careers in STEM, because we have a huge STEM skill shortage, and I think someone says that kids are all interested in two things: dinosaurs and space. The dinosaur one they grow out of, space no one ever does.
There's room to grow into it.
Yeah, there's room to grow into it, exactly. And that's what we're trying to do, is to literally inspire the next gen. So they're building their satellites, and our aim is to put it into space where they can then bring data back to Earth, and they realize how interesting space is and what careers that they can do in there. And we work with a number of different schools all over the country so far, and actually there's some educational institutions all over the world who are building our satellite kits, and they're going to be sending it over to us when our satellite's ready to go into space. And it's my sort of role in the business is operations manager, so I cover everything that the CEO does. Basically anything that needs CEO sign off, he handles. Everything else I basically take on, and that involves going into schools and doing presentations for students. It involves going to events involving educational institutions, whatever it may be, and it's essentially telling people why they should be interested in STEM, why it's important. And going back to your point earlier about STEAM, actually the second M has already been taken up in STEAM. They're adding medicine to it.
Okay.
Oh,
as an additional aspect. So it's
so it's going to be STEAM.
STEAM, yeah.
Just keep adding M's onto the end.
Basically, yeah, it sounds it, yeah. But it's and again, I firmly think that it should be STEAM and not just STEM, because they interlink. They they all, you can't have science without being, if you don't put science into practice, it's just words on a bit of paper. It's data
I think
analysis.
That A in STEAM, that artistic kind of flair needed to help communicate the other aspects of STEM, I think is the importance of it. And I think it's that the kind of the art bracket of it. It's not about trying to lump doing oil portraiture. It's about using artistic skills to be communicating
creative thinking.
Creative thinking, but it's also bringing the science and the maths from in art. If you look at certain pieces of artwork, there are influences of Fibonacci sequences and all sorts of crazy geometry, and it's the golden ratio is another one, and that's maths, that's science. So it does all cross over, and obviously engineering, you need to understand the physics, Andy.
It is all overlaps, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And you can't, and that's what we do at Ambersat is our course is completely cross-curricular. So you're touching on little aspects of everything, so people realize those interconnects of how things work, and it's wrapping it all up into a nice sweet chocolate that is outer space. That is all about it. It's all and instead of getting the kids to sort of sit there and listen to someone drone on about some interesting subjects, I'm sure, but actually getting them to do all the work is a totally different outcome, because suddenly the kids are like, oh, what more can I do? How else can I do more of this? What else can I do? At which point you can say, right, there's Raspberry Pi, there's this, there's Hackspaces, there's Makers, all of these things interlink, and you can people, I've seen so many articles in the papers about how kids are all interested in their iPads and they don't want to do anything practical. They don't want to go outdoors and all the rest of it. I call bull on that, because the number of kids that I've worked with and seen in person where they're just excited about the concept of doing what the satellite kits. It's like, no, they aren't. No, that's completely wrong, because they are all interested, and then they are all going off and using those tools, the laptops, the iPads, and what have you, to find more information. So instead, you're directing them then at educational content. And I think you mentioned it before about how there's so much content available now. If there's someone that you don't like, that you can't get away with, you can just switch over to someone else. And there are so many good content providers out there that it's actually engaging kids into STEM now and STEAM is so much easier than it ever was. But there's not enough of us doing it. The maker community does a great job of trying to do it. Kids Invent Stuff are a fantastic example of that. And yet, they can't be in more than one place. We can't be in more than one school at any given time. We're all limited, and it takes a village.
Yeah, it's an uphill struggle, isn't it? But it's absolutely right, and I think that's the crux of it, isn't it? Is the more accessible and available we make it, the more it is picked up, and it's that kind of it's that kind of Rolling Stone gathers no moss kind of thing of if it's got that kind of that momentum, it's just going to continue going.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's not even it's not even that there aren't people out there trying. It's that there's lots of people trying, but they're all sort of disconnected from each other. And there's none of that collaboration across different organizations, a lot of which are charities as well, and doing it for the right reasons, but some of them don't know about each other. And it's like, right, okay, so if they don't know about each other, how are they going to help each other? How are they going to make a difference? So it's a case of actually need to figure all that out.
Yeah.
So do you think, I mean, sort of stepping back slightly for a moment, I mean, because your company essentially is directly, rather than Al's is kind of looking at, right, we want to do this because we want to give back. We want to actually make a difference, not just as, function of any business is to make money. That's almost the definition of a business. If you're not making money, you're not going to stay in business. But you're doing that extra to kind of go, we want to make money. We want to have a successful business. We've grown as a business, but we want to give something back. Now, your company is essentially actually designed to address STEM.
Yeah, well,
issues.
we actually pivoted to that because of Kickstarter. So the original concept was put through on Kickstarter. It got funded very quickly, and then when the CEO looked at the demographics and the breakdowns, a lot of the people buying it were educational establishments. So they thought, right, let's pivot towards education because there seems to be an interest here. That was in early 2020. A few weeks later, the entire world shut down. So it was bad timing, like really bad timing. But the interest in education is absolutely there. And the course that the product comes with, it's designed for that. Originally, the concept that the CEO had was it would be a commercial test platform for anyone wanting to do experiments in space and a hobbyist thing. So those two aspects, but then it became the educational product that it is now. But it still retains the commercial aspects of it. But we're focused on the education side of things. So it's a little bit unusual because as soon as we pivoted to, we had all the interest in education right at the beginning, pandemic hit, and then that education interest has just died off. And it's like, right, okay, what do you want to do then?
The momentum's changed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think the pandemic obviously hit everyone.
Yeah.
But schools are still recovering from it, and the students. I mean, there's still things being put in place to mitigate for, say, GCSE students, for example. So, the government just announced that GCSE exams in January, there's some international ones, and then obviously in June in the summer, we'll have for maths and physics specifically, we'll have all the formulae that they might previously had to have memorized. They will actually get given, which is something that happened last year. But there's kind of, it's just probably for the final time, and then it's concession to the disruption that they experienced sort of during that time. I mean, obviously, everything will get balanced out in the exam grades anyway, but it's just things like that are still happening. Schools are still kind of recovering from the effects of the pandemic.
And at the same time, though, if they actually kind of took a step towards, I understand learning equations is always useful, but equally, Wolfram Alpha now exists.
Recognizing that there isn't a need to learn them anymore.
This is
understand them.
The classic trope in our day was you won't always have a calculator in your pocket. I mean, little did they know we were walking around with supercomputers in our pockets.
Yeah, I mean, it's that thing that the computing power we hold in our phones is more than what it took to send astronauts to space.
Orders of magnitude beyond that.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, memorizing formulas, like what skill does that show other than someone's ability to memorize a formula? It doesn't show that.
I remember seeing
teach them to read and understand the formula.
100%.
100%.
I remember seeing a post from a NASA employee, saying if you're feeling a bit of a struggle, or if I work for NASA and I still have to look up the formula for whatever it was every time I use it. I'm an engineer at NASA. As you would expect them to be the elite of that sort of thing, and it was like, no, we're all human beings. We all have blind spots. We all have things that we struggle to remember.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the struggles, I think, with communicating that sort of thing to kids is like, you're not going to get 100% in every single one of your exams, and no one is expecting you to.
Yeah.
Learn what you can learn.
Yeah.
And that's all we ask. It's that kind of.
I think there's a slightly different sort of trying to sort of think about the STEM sort of thing. Examination assessment systems, again, that's an area of education. If you want to kind of really get into that, get onto Edu Twitter and sort of start sort of spouting about different exam structures and the like. It can get horrible. But yeah, knowing what to put and how to replace. I totally agree. In science, no one should have to remember an equation. GCSE level, particularly, if you can, it will speed up generally the process. You're probably going to have a better. If you've got a good understanding of that equation, you're probably going to remember it. So there is that side to it. Yeah. But I think there can be an issue sometimes because schools are often focused on examinations. They're focused on the curriculum for that, the specification from the exam board. That I think students will often see science, particularly. Not sure about technology so much about that, but probably maths too, as being just this thing for exams, and they miss out. And this is one of the things that I, as a physics specialist, and my last role, I was involved in training non-specialists to teach physics. If you're not, one of the reasons I never liked teaching. I find biology interesting. I didn't do biology A level. I do have an O level in biology. I find it interesting, but not being most of the schools I taught at, I rarely had to teach biology. I think the last time I taught biology in a school was something like 2008, 2009, because a member of staff went off ill, and it was just like, right, we need a chair at the class, and I took over a Set 1 biology GCSE class for a couple of terms. And I'll be honest, I was about a page and a half ahead of them. Yeah, I hadn't taught biology. At that point, I hadn't taught biology probably for 10 years, other than a junior science, so Key Stage 3, so ages 11 to 13. Apart from that, I hadn't taught biology, and that's relatively simple stuff anyway. I hadn't taught biology in over 10 years at that point. So I was literally a page and a half ahead, which was, it's fine. I'm a science specialist. That's something I should be able to do. But I couldn't give, apart from a couple of little sort of things, we did a bit of time on the kidneys, and I had a relative who'd suffered from kidney failure. So I knew a little bit about kidney, and I've had a couple of relatives that had kidney issues. So I was able to sort of talk about that with examples. But other parts of biology, often I couldn't. Whereas in physics, because I'd been teaching it for so long, because it was my degree subject, because it was something I've been passionate about for 40 years now at this stage, I have those little stories. It is something I read about physics stuff. I still watch physics videos. Just, oh, look, there's that interesting thing. And it might be something I've taught 100 times, 1,000 times, but it'll be something I'll go, oh, yeah, there's a slightly different angle on that, and I like that. Or it goes into maybe a bit more of the history, and it might be that I've maybe got a bit confused because science history. There's a lot of books that don't get it quite right, and sometimes it takes time to find out. But I think sometimes students get kind of a block on STEM because they see it as, particularly like physics, it's a bunch of equations. It's a bunch of complicated words. It's about exams. And I think they sometimes miss out on the beauty, the application, the wonder. Yeah, I've seen, so I've, as I spent a lot of time in middle management, did a lot of observations on teachers, and sometimes you kind of think, I've just watched a lesson and there's real beauty in that bit of physics, for example, and none of that was shared with that class. And yeah, stuff like that really kind of makes me sad, gets my goat. There's lots of things I could say about that.
I think the key word there, though, is passion. There's a big difference between interest and passion.
Yeah.
And the best communicators are always phenomenally passionate. And Brian Cox is a perfect example, or Dara O'Brien. When you get into the maths, he's a very, very talented communicator, not just comedian / mathematician. It's all rolled into one.
Yeah, but to be fair, also, not all physics teachers are good not all physics specialists are good communicators, though, as well.
Yeah. That's with any specialist.
Yeah, you could say that about any subject, I think.
Yeah.
I've worked with plenty of teachers who think, why are you a teacher? Because you can't communicate.
Yeah,
you don't like children.
Yeah, this is why when people have asked me, would you want to go into teaching? No, I don't like children. It's that age. Secondary education is where I would be that's my sort of age limit. I definitely couldn't do primary school. Further education I could probably do, and university, that's fine. But I don't like children. I just do not like children. So and I'm not advanced enough to do the university lecturing stuff. So it's like further education, no, and secondary education, no. So
I think the problem with that kind of stuff, though, is it's often about, like, if you have a passion for something that you're trying to communicate, it's a lot easier and a lot more rewarding to communicate that to people who are passionate about the subject as well, and people who want to learn. And I think that's one of those distinctions, again, with the kind of getting into something like further education or higher education, where the people are making a decision to go onto that course.
Yeah.
So there's already a level of interest in them knowing that they want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to find a way to get through to someone who doesn't want to be there.
Yeah, I think... sorry, go on, Al.
I was going to say that the reason I kind of do a lot of the work I do with primary school groups is they're always learning. It's not that they want to; it's natural for them. And the piece I love most is putting a screwdriver in their hands. 6, 7 years old, and watching them just go at something. It doesn't matter if they damage it; just take it to bits. And the number of scout groups and things that we've done courses with, and you come back and there's a 6-inch slong carved into a laptop screen. It's unfortunate, but they're expressing themselves.
Primary school kids are a whole different ball game. We were at a school in Selby, and we had, during the course of the day, over 100 students, different age groups, and they were all so enthusiastic. And all we were doing was telling them about what we do as businesses, and then doing stomp rockets with them. But we were asking them facts about space before each did a stomp rocket, and some of the stuff that they were coming out with was just like, these kids are absolutely 100% you can get them over the line to be 50-50 at least on STEM. And there was at least a good 10% of them, I would say, who were 100% going to be going down the STEM route in a few years' time. They would be going off to do whatever. And if you, like Alan said, if you put the right stimulus in front of them, give them a screwdriver, a laptop, and whatever else, they will take it to bits. How many times have we heard that same thing amongst the maker community of, I started by taking stuff apart.
Yeah.
Now I like to build things. How many times have we heard that trope? Like, I think every maker I've ever come across has always had that same thing. I like taking things apart. Now I like building things because I like to figure out how they work so I can then apply it. It's like, you figured that out when you were younger. How easy is it to give that same thing to kids? And, Alan, what you're doing when you give a screwdriver to a 6-year-old, just don't give them a soldering iron because, fingers.
Or if you do, show them how to use it at least. But I think that's it, isn't it? It's finding a practical example to apply theoretical knowledge to. And I think that's where you have those memorable lessons when you were at school of, when you did something that then made sense. And you go, now I understand why you're teaching me this bit. Yeah. Now I understand the nonsense that you're spouting at me and telling me to memorize. Now I understand why it's useful.
Yeah, I mean, we do a session on rockets, and it touches on literally rocket science, and we then illustrate that example with bottle rockets that students make themselves, and it's such a simple project. It's such a simple session. We can run it in half a day, yet it gives them enough of a taste of rocket science that they're suddenly fascinated by it. It's like, they might not remember it all, but they'll remember that they built those bottle rockets, and that will then spur on to other things. And I think
not only that, I think that there's demystifying it as well. We've all heard that, like, rocket science is the super elite lofty goal that no one can get to. It is. It's not a rocket.
It's not rocket science. Yeah,
it's not rocket science. Yeah.
And when you go, you're now doing rocket science. This is actual rocketry. This is the stuff that you were told that was for super elite, super smart people.
Yeah,
it is accessible to you. You can learn this. You can do this. It's that kind of.
Until you've got to land it, though, rocket science is just a controlled explosion, isn't it? We can all manage one of those.
Exactly.
We've all hidden one of those from our parents and beers at some point.
Yeah. I mean, it's that, you talk about how it's demystifying and making it accessible. I think a lot of the time, for me, maths was one of my weaker subjects. And it felt inaccessible. Like, how do I apply this in everyday life? How do I apply the more complicated things in everyday life? Of course, then I go off and, much, much later on in life, decide I'm going to be a mechanical engineer. And now I see how the maths is applied. And it's the practical application of it that makes me think, right, now I get it. Now I see how it can work. And again, it's that once you've actually had access to it, it makes things so much more interesting to learn. And that's what, encouraging kids to build and have fun and play around with taking things apart and building their own projects, whatever they may be. It's the thing that will actually say to them, now go off and learn more about it.
Yeah, it's the inspiration and the impetus, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the spark that lights, the fire. That's what you've...
It's the foot that stomps the rocket.
Yes.
Did either of you, or Jamie, you as well, did any of you have kind of an inspirational sort of science, technology, engineering, maths moment in school, something that was really memorable? Did you have 100%. Kind of... 100%. What was yours, Jamie?
We had a company called SciTech who would run week-long workshops, not residential workshops, but it was run at Manchester Grammar School. So they would go to schools in the Northwest and they would come in and do in an assembly lesson, and they would have all the things like putting dry ice into empty paint tins, bashing the lid on, and then poof, sending them up into the thing. And it was that moment, you know, from being a young kid, they'd come in every year and they would do an assembly with the whole school, just showing all of these fantastic things, you know, that were, you know, that was like in the school setting, in the education setting of like practical examples, and then bits of talk on, you know, how and why it works. You know, it's that dry ice is expanding gas and building pressure, and then the lid goes off. And it was really, really inspiring communication and bringing accessibility to it. And then when I got to year 6, I was fortunate enough to go on the kind of week-long session where we did, you know, lots of things like building super light, you know, electronics projects with like sort of extruded corrugated plastic propeller cars, doing like electronics thing, and then doing measuring drag with like a bike with a parachute or with a wooden board, or as it goes, you know, doing timed things, writing the scientific method down, and data analysis and chemistry, and then how cooking mixes into that, and the chemistry of cooking then, and like all of these wonderful practical examples of applied science to young kids. That's the stuff that really got me into it.
Al?
We had a physics/science teacher who, at the time, we all thought he was just bonkers, but it turns out he just knew his trade incredibly well. You know,
so he was bonkers.
Yeah. the first physics lesson we walked into with him, he stood at the front of the class, and we all took our seats and sat down, and he was facing the blackboard. And then he turned around, set his hand on fire, and started waving to us all. You know, that was his first lesson. He was burning the vapors, not the fluid. But he then, you know, the following year he went on to buy a Mini, and obviously a second-hand Mini. But he taught us all how to pop the locks on it using half a tennis ball, and then he lit some thermite on the bonnet and showed it disappearing through the engine bay. You know,
Nice.
It's the sort of things you don't forget, though. You know, as a kid that age, you're talking about it for months afterwards, and yeah, it's keeping it ticking over in their heads and inspiring like that makes the difference. Because of course we spent the next 6 months trying to work out what thermite was, and you know, yeah. Eventually, somebody got a copy of the Jolly Roger cookbook, and it went downhill. Yeah.
I actually never had anything that springs to mind off the top of my head. I always remember being fascinated by science and all of the other stuff, but I cannot remember a single individual moment. It's more like the interest was always there, and you know, through watching TV and the different cartoons that were on, and I just remember all of that, me wanting to build the things that I saw on TV. And that's kind of where it always came from, of I feel like I can build all these things. I want to be able to build all these things. And there was a like a art group thing that so we used to have these things called play schemes in Middlesbrough, which were on during the summer holidays. And at one of those things, there was a group who were doing making, just craft stuff. And I remember thinking, I want to build an Iron Man style armor from the 90s Iron Man cartoon.
Nice.
And the guy, he actually lived across the road from us, and he talked me through it all, like figuring out how to fold the tin and all the rest of it. And I was like, I really wanted to do it. And then he ended up moving away and, you know, whatever else. But I just remember that being something that I was like, I want to be able to do this. And I've always had that interest. But in terms of anything at school, I can't really remember. Like, we were quite fortunate that we got to do a lot of practicals. So in engineering, we did practical. In electronics, we did them. So it was always just reinforcing. And even in primary school, we were getting to play with little wire circuits and batteries and when they were teaching us about series circuits and parallel circuits, but I was a little bit ahead of everyone else because my dad worked with electronics. He used to repair TVs, so I had a little bit of knowledge from him. And it was, so again, because of that, it was a case of, I like making things, I like building things, I have this interest, I want to figure it out more. Then, of course, I went and did law because I wanted to figure out how the world works.
I was just going to say, because for the folks who don't know you, perhaps as well as others, you went into law, and later then went into engineering.
Then went into engineering, yeah.
Do you think perhaps if you'd had a more significant, so for example, if the company you currently work for had turned up to your school when you were 11, 12 years old, 10 years old, do you
100%.
think perhaps that might have changed the direction of your sort of career path?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, when I was at GCSE, I wanted to do computer science and games design at university. I even went to some sort of lectures that they were putting on at Teesside Uni about that subject. And it was only having an argument with my friend's older brother where I was like, I could do anything I want. I could do law because I had the interest in law anyway. And I was in year 10. And I thought, I can do anything I want. I can do law. And it was like, right, I'll show this dickhead. I'm going to go off and do law. So I went away and did law. But it was not anything that was unusual to me. It was still, because law and STEM, they are very similar in a sense of they are understanding of certain principles. It's just
a set of rules, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a set of
rules. Yeah.
And law is very much the same thing. It's the application of the law and understanding the law and those little quirks and fun little things about it that make it interesting. But at the same time, it doesn't have the practical aspect of having that tangible thing that you've built where it's like, oh, I built a robot or I built a satellite and it's gone to space. It's a very different, that tangibility is very different. And, also mechanical engineering, you get to build things and I can potentially build a rocket. I'm building a satellite.
So here's a question that I've got to sort of ask the group, as it were.
Yeah.
Because obviously I know we've all had, kind of influential parents or folks in our lives that have been involved in some sort of making or repairing or things like that, that have obviously had an influence on us growing up, in us seeing them fixing stuff or helping them out, passing them tools or things like that. How are you currently doing that? Because I know that we're also all we all have young people in our lives as family members who are aware of what we do. So how are we all doing that, kind of passing on that knowledge, that those experiences that we had, and passing them on to those future generations? So I know for me, we've recently bought the Pie Hut's advent calendar. So that's been projects that we've been tackling in this house, is doing bits of coding and electronics and with the Raspberry Pi Pico and stuff.
Yes.
Because
I mean, what I've been doing for the past few years now is for every Christmas, birthday, all the gifts are STEM related gifts. So there's loads of them on Amazon and in the range, and being at all these places, they all sell STEM related gifts. They're quite they're not expensive. Like, some are really expensive. There's a V8 V6 engine that you can build, which I'm tempted to buy just for myself and label it as a gift. But that's a different matter. But there's also
the transparent one.
Yes, the transparent one. I think it's by Haynes, actually.
Yeah.
But
there are a couple, but I think Haynes does do one. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's buying them those kits, and kind of sneakily getting the parents, because for my cousins especially, it's getting them involved. But with my little sister, it's a case of encouraging her to figure out the answers herself, because she has access to things that I never had as a child. And I think it's important that she learns how to find the information. And if she's then exhausted all options, it's like, right, now I'll come and have that intervention and give her that hand. But also it's letting her know she has the accessibility and that she has the skills. She just needs that confidence to go out and be able to find the information herself. And I think that, I mean, teaching her how to use tools and stuff, that's going to come a little bit later on, I think, because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like giving her a set of screwdrivers might be a recipe for disaster, because I like all my electronics as they are. I'm the only one who gets to mess with them. I feel like if I give her
setting boundaries when you give her the screwdrivers. These are the things
Yeah.
you can take apart, and if you take them apart, unplug them first.
Yes.
Not these bits. Yeah.
How old is she?
Yeah. She's 12 now, so she'll be.
Oh crikey! I gave my youngest always sort of shown more. Both my kids are makers. They make different things. My eldest does a lot more with things like textiles. Loves doing that. More academic, very very academic person. Very inclined towards textiles as kind of a hobby to kind of sort of relax. Both of them have, throughout until they reached sixth form, they were both homeschooled, so constantly having kind of opportunities to make things as well. My youngest, much more inclined towards other forms of making. Still, actually, textiles. I mean, again, my wife is very interested in sort of textile type crafts. So there's always been that kind of influence. It's always been around. We've got a chest of drawers in this room that's just full of sewing things and materials. There's a sewing box. There's probably a bag here full of knitting. That's the kind of thing that's just lying around. Just in the kind of the front room here. But because my youngest was so much more interested in kind of making stuff, more inclined to maybe come out and help me in the workshop. 8th birthday, toolbox contained small but properly functioning, because I think once you get beyond toddler, I partly says my own experience. I hated getting presents as a child that didn't function. We get a pair of binoculars or that have plastic lenses that offer no magnification. I found that very frustrating, and I always sort of said, when I have children, I will not buy them something that doesn't function. Might not function particularly well, but it will function. I'm not going to buy them a pair of car size £1,000 binoculars with built-in GPS and stabilization system, whatever. As much as I'd love a pair of those myself, but that's not going to happen. But I can remember having a saw that wouldn't cut. You could literally run it across your hand and it wouldn't cut. Now, for something like a toddler, fine, absolutely. But when you're sort of 7 or 8, so she was given a toolbox containing tools, quite a few tools bought from Wilko's in the UK. So for those listening from other places who may not be familiar with Wilko's or Wilkinson's, as it was previously known, it's kind of a small sort of, I wouldn't describe it as a supermarket, but a general market type shop where you can buy any household, bit of everything. There's household stuff. You can go in and buy, you need some sheets for your bed or a duvet cover, you can buy that there. If you need some shampoo, you can buy that there. If you need some vitamins, you can buy that there. If you need some notepads, nothing particularly high end. It's generally kind of But they sell some of their tools. They sell are smaller, but they are proper tools. Now they're not. You can't compare a pair of pliers to a pair of knips or something like that, Knipex rather. Yeah, there is, but they're good. Yeah,
they're
actually
inexpensive.
fit. They're inexpensive,
functional
and they
tools.
fit a smaller hand.
Yeah.
And so toolbox, and I actually kind of had a box. I reused a box, and I filled it up with things. There were a few things that I kind of just recycled, things that I was spare from me. But yeah, I actually went out and bought these tools with the intent that this toolbox will last a lifetime. There are tools that can be, and to be honest, apart from a few kind of screwdrivers and pliers, which I keep in the kind of the drawer, and obviously the Leatherman in most sort of drawers there. Apart from that, it's the nearest set of tools. So quite often, something needs fixing, and I can't do it with the contents of my desk. That'll be the next port of call because it's kept in conservatory. So I go there, grab the toolbox rather than having to go out to the tinkerage and get tools from there. So I would suggest at 12 years old, definitely get it. And get some scrap, get a couple of bits of electronics and say, there you go. There's I wouldn't suggest necessarily a TV, but there's an old radio.
Yeah, I think one of the things, because she's very interested in doing medicine as a long-term thing, she's always been into that, and I feel like I don't want to sort of nudge her towards muddy the waters too much either. Yeah. Like I want to give her the practical
so a scalpels thing instead.
Yeah.
Post-mortem kit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it might push her down the surgery route. You give her tools and access to, bits of metal. Next thing you might wake up with a prosthesis or something.
Yeah, but as I say, it's a lot of it is getting that fine balance between doing, because I have a tendency to end up taking over as well. So, and I know that. So it's like, right, I want her to learn the skills and the resiliency that she needs in later life, where she needs to be independent. Because in fairness, in her defense, she has 3 older brothers who are much older than her. And in all likelihood, if she ever had a problem, it'd be a case of one of my brothers can help kind of thing. But I want her to have the skills where she doesn't need to rely on us. And that'll be the same for my youngest sister now, who was born 6 weeks ago. So, and I'm just trying to figure that one. Plenty of time for her. Yeah, plenty of time for her.
Wait a few years for that,
yeah. But and again, it's the same with my cousins as well. It's giving them the sort of tools that they need when I'm giving them these STEM projects and STEM related gifts, where they need to figure it out themselves. And trying to get their parent, if they need to, they can get their parents involved and whatever else. I don't know if they end up playing with those toys that I get them. I don't. But the intention is that these gifts are designed to be put together, assembled, and do all sorts of weird and wonderful. I mean, there's so many options now.
There is,
and I'm half tempted to buy some of them for myself.
Well, there's a perfect opportunity to do them with your cousins.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think
even if it's just for them to see your passion in you taking over, pushing them out the way, and you finishing it off.
Yeah, just give them. I might get the. Have you seen there's a Raspberry Pi one that's I think it's a robot cat or something. Little laser cut ply and whatever else. I'm half tempted to get them that as a group project, but at the same time, they will wind up killing each other.
Yeah, forcing a group project on anyone is never fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How about you, El? What's your kind of take on the thing?
We're quite lucky, I suppose. I've got two boys. Henry's 4 today, and George is 7. But then I've got to factor in. There's also Alison, my wife, who's a microbiologist and a very talented artist. So she covers the sciences I don't know a thing about, and she covers the arts side of it that I struggle with. I can do business and I can do economics, but I could no way do biology or sketch to save my life.
Yeah.
But I was looking around the room as we were talking, and right above the PC, there's I don't know if you know what that is, but it's Streptococcus. So it's a flesh-eating bacteria. That was my youngest's first cuddly toy. There's random bits and pieces. That's a piece Alison's drawing at the moment with George's help.
Wow.
George's artwork over my shoulder. Yeah, they learn from everywhere. I mean, literally this morning, because it was Henry's birthday, I'd signed up for one of Mark Rober's Crunch Labs Science in a Box setups. So I've signed up for that for the next year, but on the basis that we could give it to George today to keep him out of Henry's way while Henry played with his presents. So George had unpacked it all and got it built, and it's a disc launcher. Turn it on and it spins up, and then you without getting myself in the face, you can trigger it and launch plastic discs across the room, which is brilliant unless you forget to take the batteries with you. So we were sat there, Henry had unpacked all his presents, he was playing quite happily, and I've got George in the corner sulking because he's got no batteries. Henry noticed that and wandered across to me, bearing in mind he's 4, and he went, "Phillips number 1, please, Daddy." Because he knows I've always got my screwdrivers in my pocket. And I gave him a Phillips number 1, and he went off, and he literally took the batteries out of his own toy to put in George's. And it was the most heartwarming moment.
Yeah, that's very cute. That is very cute.
But yeah,
selecting the correct screwdriver as well.
This is it.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. It made my day.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
Meanwhile, the in-laws are sat there looking shell-shocked,
Yeah.
I think that's the sort of thing, isn't it? Is it's much the same in our house with mine. Whenever it's that kind of like the batteries need changing, there's the tools. Go crack on, figure out which screwdriver you need, and then figure out which batteries you need, figure out which way up. It's that kind of it's the little skills, but it's that kind of.
The thing I've always tried to avoid is the typical, in certainly my experience, was the typical clip round the ear and hold that torch still,
Exactly.
Yeah,
because I had that more than enough times.
Yeah, I was often on torch holding duties. Yeah, particularly when we get into the car.
Equally, I wouldn't have given that up. If I was sent back now and given the option, I'd have done it with Dad. It was fantastic getting that time together. So
I think that's important. I kind of, as a educationalist, I always kind of worry about the difficulty of actually looking at the effects of things. Educational research is so difficult, and seeing something put in place and having that impact. And I kind of worry. Obviously, we've got two elements here. We've got this kind of what's happening in schools and what's happening at homes. And what's happening at homes, yes, there are some great facilities around, but I worry that actually there are generations. I can't say it's a generation. It is generations of people who perhaps have not had great experience of STEM, who then don't necessarily see it as their place to help or guide their child, the significant young people in their lives, toward not necessarily careers, but just kind of the opportunities that STEM presents to learn stuff, to do stuff, whether it's being kind of a maker. And I don't know how we can kind of measure what happened in the past and where it is now, and how things that for example, you guys are doing and going into schools, and how we can then measure the impact of that, because of course it's at least 5 to 10 years hence where that impact will be.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an element of that, but at the same time, I feel like sometimes it's about those parents knowing where to go. I know we've had people who've joined the hack space as students that, like, they're under 16, they haven't even started their GCSEs in some cases, and they've come in with their parents, and their parents have been bringing them along to the hack space to work on projects that they have in mind. And I think, and their parents have admitted that they aren't makers themselves. They don't do that kind of thing. It's something that the kid found, and that they've basically allowed for that to happen. I think I think there's two aspects to it. One is the time availability of the parents, because, right now, I think people with kids and who are working full time and trying to make ends meet, it's not easy for them at the moment. And also, it's accessing facilities and people who like the hack space is a great example, because it's a collection of different people with a different variety of skills that parents can take their child to and say, my child is interested in this stuff. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help? And making that more accessible, but at the same time, it's a fine balance, because, again, there's risk assessments and all of that wonderful stuff that you have to do. But at the same time, I do think that if you give parents the opportunity and point them in the right direction, they will take that up. But you need and again, I'm going to say this once and try not to say it again, you need the political will to back that and encourage that in order for it to be widely adopted. People need to know about it, and the people who are making policies need to be shouting about it, because you can make the big statements of, we want more kids in STEM, but if you do nothing about it, then you don't want more kids in STEM. You're just saying a soundbite. And that's as far as I'm going to go on the policy side of things.
But that's the crux of it with all of it, isn't it? That's what we've kind of, this whole topic has been about, is increasing accessibility and availability for that slippery slope into STEM and STEAM and STEAM. It's all that kind of it's all really interesting stuff to most people. It's just finding that right niche, that right bit that clicks, or as human beings, that we've got that innate kind of want to understand or to function or to make, or we'll all make a sandwich, we'll all do these kind of things, and it's finding out that, oh, actually, if I cook this little bit of thing at a different temperature, I get a different result. It's all finding out that, oh, that's a bit of science that I'm doing there.
Yeah.
And realizing that application of the stuff that people are trying to teach you or that are trying to show you, it's then that slippery slope where people start getting really into it, I think.
And it's also ensuring that young people in particular are allowed to make mistakes and are allowed to break things. They're allowed 100%. To experiment, because far too often the message is, you have to be perfect. You have to get 100% on exams. You have to do all this right. No, you don't. There's a reason we have a process called prototyping. You get to fuck up.
Yeah, too right. That's exactly it, isn't it? It's creating that safe space for someone to play and experiment and learn and make mistakes, and those mistakes are lessons. It's that that learning experience as a whole.
Yeah, it's literally real. Prototyping in and of itself is, you build something, see if it works, or you cock it up and it doesn't work, or you break it or whatever. Then you try again and you try again, and far too often you'll find that kids will make a mistake and they'll be like, I can't do this, I'm going to throw it away and never look at it again. And it's like,
I'm embarrassed, I made a mistake. And
Yeah.
whereas what Dave's just said is the problem solving.
Problems, yeah.
And that is exactly what it's all about. It's that figuring out, I can't make this work. Why isn't this working? It's that entire thing. I can't understand this thing.
It's the
Mhm.
logic
I don't
process of
understand.
exploring that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's that engaging that kind of
Who, what, where,
part
why,
of that
when.
brain.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
100%.
but for some reason that has been stripped away in out of the kids, where it's like if you make a mistake, you have to throw it away and never look at it again. And I don't know where that influence comes from. I don't know when it started. But
I think there's an element. I think it's only an element. I don't think it's the entire story of it. Within school, there is this kind of push. Every term you get an assessment, and at that assessment, you're expected to get better every time you do something. You're expected to get you do a test, you do a quiz, an exam. Well, there is that kind of expectation. You're trying to get 100%, and those that get the best get extolled as being kind of obviously the brightest. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, because I think we should celebrate those who are doing well. But I think that focus perhaps on assessment and particularly monitoring and reporting kind of maybe muddies the water with regard to, for example, you talked about the prototyping process. It's exactly the same as the scientific method. In the scientific method, you make a hypothesis. You say, okay, I think this happens because of this reason, so I'm going to design an experiment. I do this experiment. If your results match that hypothesis, then you've got the starting of a working start of a scientific theory. But if it doesn't match, then maybe you need to redesign the experiment. Maybe there was a flaw with the experiment. I mean, so one of the we don't have the time, or the schools don't have the time to actually do that and to teach that, and to actually put them through the process of designing an experiment that doesn't work, and then redesigning the experiment. Might do an evaluation. You might go, okay, you're trying to calculate a value for
why will this fail?
G. You calculate a value for G, and you get a value of 11.3 rather than 9.81. And you kind of then go, okay, well, why isn't that? Well, I didn't measure my length of my pendulum correctly, and I was only timing 5 swings rather than perhaps 10 swings, or my angle was too large. And so you might evaluate it, but you don't really go through that process of, right, okay, let's make it better. Let's try it again. Now let's try it again. Now let's try again, because
I think there's an element there as well.
You've got 3 lessons to do that, and then you're on to something else.
Yeah, I think that element of like linear forward progress that's kind of pushed in schools is that kind of, that model fits some people, but not everyone. And I think being able to make those lateral steps, those lateral movements to go, this hasn't worked, this has become a problem. Is there a better way of doing this? Or is there a way where this will work? Is there a way where we can optimize this or change direction, pivot onto another method, another avenue, another application for this hypothesis, rather than trying to aim for the result that we're getting to? And I think it's those lateral movements that might suit other folk better. Yeah,
well, we have an there's that image of the evolution of technology over 100 years and the evolution of the education system over 100 years, and how it hasn't really changed from what it was in Victorian times to
it went now. From slate to paper, and then from paper to iPad, and everything else has stayed the same.
Basically, and that
nothing wrong with slate and chalk.
It's better than getting hit now with an iPad.
Definitely.
They don't fly very well.
I don't know. It depends on the angle. If you frisbee them, they
do
fly.
Skim it across the desks.
Ideally, if they're an OtterBox, so they bounce nicely.
But if you have so many more kids now from so many more diverse backgrounds as well, and different upbringings, to throw them all into the same type of environment and expect them all to achieve the same sort of result, it's mental. There's no model for that anymore, yet somehow we're again.
I think the understanding there though is that, like I said before about the expectation on the kids is, explaining to the kids that we're not expecting you to get 100% in 100% of the exams you take. That is not an expectation, and generally speaking, if you are getting that, there's a bigger problem here. And I think the flip on that is that schools aren't expecting all the kids to learn all the subjects. We know that everybody is unique, and we all have our own set of challenges we're dealing with, and set of subjects that we love and the subjects that we hate, and understanding that every teacher is going to teach them other skills as well as the subjects that they're teaching them. And it's that kind of that general communicating that message, I think, is just as important to the kids as any other subject. To be able to say, you might find some fun and some interest in this branch of science or this particular artistic process, but you might not enjoy art history and the writing about a painter from 100 years ago, but you might really enjoy doing a bit of geometry or some product design because you've got an idea to release a product that you've had in the back of your mind, and you might do a bit of engineering on it.
Yeah.
Or you might design a new running shoe that you're going to get one of the other students to design a 3D model and then have a go at 3D printing it, and then realize it's a good 3D printing product. And then, you need a bit of your art background and your product design. And, it's all those kind of like, it's finding that bit that attaches to that part of that kid's brain or that adult's brain that I think is where you're struggling. There isn't the time or the money of the
well, I think more importantly than the time and the money though is the skills aren't there. We don't have, there was that whole thing many years ago where someone said every child has to learn coding, but then it was like, oh, right, great. Are you going to provide us with resources? Are you going to provide us with the skilled coders? No, you know how to code, right? Like, your IT teachers, you know how to code. It's like, no, we're IT teachers. This is computer science. This is different. Oh, you still need to teach all kids coding, though. It's like, how do you do that without the skilled people? And again, this is what it comes down to, where you need the skilled individuals, the specialists in those fields, to be able to make the subject inherently more interesting and be able to relay real-world examples. Because staying a page and a half ahead is, eventually,
it's absolutely no good.
I think as well, though, I think that kind of reframing, you can teach people to code without learning code, and you could very easily retrain an English teacher to teach kids code, because it's essentially storytelling with building blocks. Things like Scratch and things like that. It's structured information. That's all it is. It's a way of thinking. You don't need to ever learn any syntax for any language. You can teach kids how to code with pseudocode. It's like what's the function, what's the flow of how you structure information. If you ask for this bit of information first before this bit, what's the outcome of that? And that doesn't need to be an IT teacher. It doesn't need to be any specialist. It just needs to be someone who's understood the thought pattern.
Yeah, and again, I would say that not all of, because if you say to teachers, we need people to learn, to figure out how to code, you'll probably get them science teachers, tech teachers, engineering, maybe the maths teachers. You wouldn't go to the English teachers immediately off the, and I think that's one of the problems where it's not being opened out to everybody, where
100%,
you get to learn this. We'll put you through the training. You get to figure it out because you have the capability. It's like, oh no, it relates to computers, so it has to be an IT person who does it. It has.
It's gatekeeping. and it's
Yeah.
always a problem. Steve House and I, we both have the same struggles with like language and speech, where we can functionally code in the sense that we understand the thought process, we understand the logic and the structure of how you would solve a problem. But as Steve said before on Fills with Tools and things as well, and like discussions that he and I have had with things like this, is that we're both crap with syntax. And as like Duncan and Kjell will attest, I can solve the problem. I can think about how to do the problem solving. But remembering the syntax, which bracket do you put in before which semicolon, and which order do you put the words in, and that's the struggle. I know that's something that Steve's talked about before when he was doing the DevOps stuff. They'd pair off in teams where you'd have someone that was really good at the problem solving aspect of it, and someone else that was really good at taking a solved problem and turning it into specific structured code. So if you've got someone who's very good at syntax in a specific language, but doesn't have the nous to think through the problem, and then someone who's very good at solving a problem, it's the same way you get designers passing a design onto an engineer. One might have the skills to understand how the thing should work, and the other one might have the skills to make the thing from a drawing or a design. And I think that's, again, it's that kind of it's putting the right people in the right places with the right information, the right understanding, and the right framing of a problem.
It's the grammar of the story, without volume, that makes no sense.
But I suppose that's another aspect of it, where when it comes to students, they are expected to do a great deal on their own. But as soon as you go into industry, you're not on your own.
100%,
very rarely are you on your own, and very rarely, like when I did my law degree, we covered all aspects of law, and then we selected certain individualized options. But in practice of those particular modules, you're only ever focused on a tiny part of one of the modules. Yet you spend 3 years of your life, 4 years, including law school, looking at so many different things. But half of that stuff, the law degree is primarily academic, but you have to do it in order to go to law school. But really, they don't teach legal practice. They teach legal theory, which is a very different thing. Then the legal practice course is, again, that is practice related, but they cover a lot more stuff than what you actually do in practice, which is fair enough, that I get. But the law degree itself, that is just legal theory, and it's fun because you get to see all the logic and figuring out problem solving and all that stuff, and all the little quirky legal arguments people have made. Some interesting cases out there. But where was I going with this? Oh yeah, theory is one thing. Theory and practice are two very, very different things.
Yeah.
And that is very much the same, where you're expecting students to learn all the theory and all the practice all at the same time, and then complaining about the fact that you haven't actually given them any time, complaining about the fact that they haven't actually mastered the theory and the practice when you've been trying to stuff it in their faces at the exact same time. At least with the law degree, you do a law degree, then you go to law school. It's two distinct things. So you get the legal theory, then you do the practice.
And like you say, from like an engineering point of view, the flip side there of like, well, the parallel is that kind of the fact that, like you said, in industry, you're not trying to do everything yourself.
Yeah.
And that flip side in that engineering field of like you have to rely on other folk to do other aspects of the job. You can't be the designer and the engineer and the draftsperson and the builder and QA and QS and sign off, and you can't be all of those things. You have to rely on those. You have to specialize in something. You know, you have to.
You can try to be all those things.
Well,
However, you might go insane at the same time. You can
part of the problem with the schools, of course, is that you're trying to give young people a taste of a number of subjects. You know, there's kind of government kind of, I was going to say guidance. Guidance isn't quite the right word. You know, the directive that students are expected to do 8 subjects. Schools are assessed now on something called sort of progress 8 and achievement 8. So basically looking at 8 subjects. So that's where the majority of students in the country are expected to do 8 GCSEs. And some schools do more and some schools do less because some students aren't up for doing 8. But you've got this kind of, you're trying to introduce, if you think about kind of all knowledge as kind of a series of concentric circles going out, a bit like an onion. And we're starting in the center with sort of the basics and then kind of sort of building out. And of course, if you kind of go down a particular career, you're getting deeper, further and further away from that center, but you're not actually necessarily spreading out. You're potentially actually coming to a point. You spread out to a certain amount of time and then you focus down. So somebody who's done a PhD is generally a kind of a singular, well, not necessarily singularly, but probably one of very few, if not singularly, expertise on one particular aspect of that broader subject that their sort of PhD might be covering. You know, whether it's, I knew somebody who used to work with somebody who had a PhD that basically looked at the one particular rare newt that was found in one unique habitat near the Dungeness nuclear power station. It's like it's very, very niche.
I mean, you could almost say at that point that kind of topic, the spectrum of that topic is very minute.
See, Andy, you need to find someone who's interested in making the neurodiversity and makers thing.
Yes, yeah, I think we do.
Niche. You know, if someone is that interested in one specific in one specific
but that's
location.
That's the nature of PhD studies generally.
Yeah,
but it's
is this a call to action for our listeners then? If we know anyone who's looking for a PhD, topic.
Somebody in psychology and wants a PhD topic, we've got an idea.
Would it be Would it be neuroscience? Would it be psychology or would it be neuroscience?
It's all under the same.
Whatever. I mean, the issue with things like people working together. Some schools and some teachers do encourage that, but of course it's when it comes to assessment. We've all done projects, I'm sure, at college and the like, where kind of you work in a group and there's always that one
of you's working in a group.
And you end up doing it all, rather than kind of.
That's not me. I'm the other guy.
But so one of the problems is that education is supposed to be preparing for life, but it doesn't actually represent life. That's the kind of a thing. I mean, there's no easy answers. There's no easy answers. There's political things. There's as we've mentioned, there are a lack of specialists. I mean, just recent figures for this year, less than 20% of the required physics teachers were recruited this last year to just maintain, never mind to actually kind of improve things. And that's an approximate figure that's been going on for a couple of decades now, at least, if not longer. The numbers of people going teaching physics, particularly, similarly maths, similarly chemistry, biology is not too much of a problem. There are other subjects, languages, for example, they're massively short on trying to recruit languages. Obviously not a topic that we're necessarily thinking about now. Computer scientists, difficulty getting them in. This is a problem. And that's just one of the problems. Trying to get people to sort of change subject. There's the difficulties I've talked about already. Not having that specific knowledge, not having necessarily that passion for a subject. The willingness to retrain to teach different things. I've I've known English teachers who didn't like the idea of changing to a different book, while English literature, because the exam curriculum has changed and said you're not doing Midsummer Night's Dream, you've got to do The Tempest. And then kind of people get kind of, well, I don't want to do that. There aren't any easy answers. I think kind of sort of being mindful of time, because I didn't want this to sort of go on too long. As a waffle, we can go on for many hours, and I think we probably could go on for many hours more here this evening. But perhaps as a kind of just to sort of round off, rather than we normally do attention grabbers, but rather than doing that sort of tonight, sort of quite quickly, what would you, Alan and Kaz, as kind of the people who've come in to sort of guests this evening, what do you think from your kind of company point of view? I'm assuming that you're going to carry on doing that, but if there was one more thing you could do, one additional kind of thing that you would like to kind of try and do, that extra to what you're already doing, that maybe you're not doing, or maybe you want to do, but there's other factors in. What would that be? What would if you could do that a little bit more, if you were given a bit more time, a bit more money, had a bit more opportunity, what would be that thing that you would like to do that would be kind of STEM promoting?
So literally right now, we've got an application in for I don't really know what to call it yet, because we've not got through that part yet, but almost a STEM battle bus.
Ooh.
I'm trying to build a mobile electronics workshop that we can take around schools with a gazebo on it. Give some of these presentations around upgrading your own kit at home, or potentially just taking toasters apart or whatever e-waste we can get our hands on. We can always break it down to its component parts and just take it back to work and recycle it. But ultimately, it'd be a lot nicer for them to rebuild things and get things working. I tried the Repair Cafe initiative a couple of months ago, and it's got legs. It just needs a lot more publicity. It's a slower burn. Whereas I think something like this, if we do manage to get that funding, we've already got the vehicles. They're already in use 9 to 5, but there's nothing stopping us doing it on an evening or on a day where we've got nothing on the road. We can hopefully wheel this workbench on and off, and as I say, get a collapsing gazebo to put up outside it. And,
nice.
Just park up anywhere. That's the aim of the game.
That sounds very cool.
Really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like you need to bring that along to make it central. I'm just saying.
Hopefully, I'll have it built by then. Yeah.
That sounds great. Yeah. Cuz?
So, I mean, as I think one thing I didn't mention is my involvement with Teesside Hackspace. I alluded to the Hackspace, but I'm quite proactive with that. But so there's two aspects of it for me. So I'm going to be a bit greedy. But with Ambersat, what I want to do long term is have something that we can offer primary school kids, where they're doing that little bit of coding, they're doing the little bit of electronics, just to get a feel. So we want a primary school program that we can offer them, and also then having one for further education. But that's a little bit more challenging because of just the circumstances around it, and it needs to be more advanced than what we already have. And we only have 35 millimeters square to play with, so it can be. It's not a huge amount of space, but problems are meant to be solved, and I've solved one of them already so far. So I'll figure out the rest, I'm sure. Then for the hack space, what I want to do is there's a couple of aspects to it. The Repair Cafe initiative, I want to try and get something like that started through the hack space, and then also offer sort of workshops for kids in the school holidays. The difficulty with the Repair Cafe, it will be a case of members of the hack space dedicating some of their time to be able to do these kind of things. The work stuff, Ambersat stuff, it's all about revenue. As soon as we get the revenue in, we can build all that in to we can build that up. But for the hack space, the issue is people to man the repair cafe, and then the sort of stuff, the workshops for kids in the school holidays. The challenge is DBS checks, and in certain circumstances, you need to be a qualified teacher to be able to offer sessions like that if you're a charity, which I'm not so sure on. It's just something that someone mentioned it and I was like, that doesn't sound right. That really doesn't sound right. So I need to dig into that in a little bit more detail. But again, it's having the personnel there to be able to man those kind of things, because at that point it becomes a lot of time investment, and members have their own kids and their own things that they want to do. So it's figuring out those balances. But I'd love to be able to do that, because I feel like having a repair cafe, having those workshops for kids would really increase the amount of people getting interested in STEM, because then you can do that whole thing of talking them through the repair as they go ahead with it, which I think would be quite beneficial as well. Is there anything that the two of you would be wanting to do?
Oh, guess throw it back at the hosts. Don't know sure about this.
I thought we were going to try and keep this short. I think Andy could probably rattle off another couple of hours worth on top of this.
Well,
yeah,
I think Andy wants to have his own Tinkerage somewhere, doesn't he? The Kent Tinkerage as a makerspace. I'd love to
start. I'd love to start a makerspace. Yeah, I really would. And my thoughts with a makerspace is a decent sized one, and I kind of want it all. I want to kind of have there's a men's shed. There's time where it's just kind of as per the men's shed organisations, kind of shoulder by shoulder, something there for mental health welfare of generally older retired blokes. But then having a repair cafe, but then having those kind of opportunities for students to come in, young people to come in and be able to use machines that maybe they don't have access to during school time, or to work on, more time to work on their GCSE projects, or sessions for, the sort of the DIY for women type sort of sessions that some places run, where it's kind of like, you don't need to rely on a bloke to fix this or to put a shelf up. You can do it. And we're going to show you how. And there's some great workshops happening with that. And whether other workshops, it's like running upholstery or jewelry or silver work or leather work, and just kind of somewhere where it's kind of, there's a cafe and there's just it's open almost 24 hours a day, and there's opportunity for maybe in the night it's just by card access for members of a certain level, but then other times it's workshops, it's opportunities, it's places to go. If you're bringing your kid along to do a workshop, well, you could sit in the cafe, or you can there's a project you can do in there. I'd love to do some of that.
I'm going to be mentally noting some of those down.
I mean, I've got a list. I tell you, I seriously do. I can't remember if it's in book there. But something I've been toying with actually sort of lately, having got back into the sort of tutoring, is I literally live 250 meters from a primary school. And one of the things I used to love doing when I was teaching is going into sort of working with primary schools. Often a lot of work with gifted and talented kids in year 5 and 6, particularly just because I had to have a focus. I was working at grammar schools, so generally they were more interested in the gifted and talented students. So the definition of gifted and talented in many of the primary schools I worked with was broad, shall we say, probably broader than actually I would define it, but I didn't care, to be honest. It ticked a box from my managers, but it meant that I was sort of working with some young people that were interested in science and doing sort of STEM stuff like that. And I kind of I've been toying with the idea. I don't know how I can make it work. There's ifs and buts. My DBS is out of date, for example. It's as a sole operator, and I don't actually need it. DBS really is about protecting employers more than anything else. But that's another discussion and argument for another time. But I know the new chair of governors at the school, and I've been kind of sort of toying with kind of having a word with her and sort of saying, I've been thinking about maybe doing something, and I might be able to, but I don't have access to some of the equipment that I used to have access to make things fun and exciting. So whether it be a one-off type thing in Science Week, which is possibly where I might start, or whether it might be some sort of club. I used to be really involved with First Lego League. Yeah, it used to be a great passion. Although I have some Lego robotics stuff still. Yeah, it's moved on in the years since I've the new sort of stuff. It might be something, I don't know. But there's lots of ifs and buts. Particularly if I said, yeah, I can be a manager, mentor, trainer for that. There would be a cost involvement for the school to get involved in that, and budgets are tight. So I'm kind of toying with those sorts of ideas, and yeah, I've got various ideas that kind of related to my business in terms of tutoring, and how that might work as well. So whether to try and expand that so more people get access to what I can offer. But yeah, there's a lot of things bouncing around in my head about things like that.
I think for me, the things that I've seen that that perhaps aren't as available or accessible is seeing the kind of the wonder in kids' eyes when they can they recognize that an adult can make stuff and change stuff and can repair things that they have. Even just with my daughter and stuff, just with like having a toy that they want to change, whether it's adding a feature or changing a color or changing a shape or something, with the like 3D modeling, 3D printing, to be able to much like a repair cafe with someone bringing a broken appliance, to that kind of like mobile workstation type thing of like, come and bring a toy in and we'll give it a new feature, or if this doesn't work, let's figure out a repair to fix the toy. Let's 3D design and 3D print a new arm for whatever the robot is, or add an augmentation to a figure or a doll, or let's show you how to repair some clothing on it, or things like that will show the kids how this stuff can be done and that it can be done. I remember a story from Red, our good friend Red Smith, talking about a heartwarming moment for him when his son would come to him and say, "Dad, can we make this?" Not, "Dad, can we go and buy this?" And I think that's something that's missing a lot. And to be able to have a facility that kids can come to, whether it's like like a battle bus that goes around schools and kids all then bring the toys along, and you've got a team of people.
Things like the makers at Maker Central. Obviously, that's a one-off a year. Yeah. I can still remember. I was chatting with our friend Jim from Wave Cycles, and actually we were chatting with Tamara Robertson, and along came this little girl who was probably about 7, maybe 8 years old, who had just finished doing a session with Soph and some others, making some like little mini robots. And she came over and she saw Tamara, and she'd obviously had already kind of maybe interacted with Tamara in some way because she was so excited to see it. And she spent a good 5-10 minutes telling Tamara all about this robot. And Tamara is excellent with young children. And then Lindsay Murphy of Lindsay Creative came along as well, and kind of really sort of engaged. And just seeing that this little girl was so excited about this robot and was explaining how she built it, what each part of it did, and that was just magical to see. And now whether that young girl will go into engineering, maybe not, or maybe go into art, maybe not. But there was an excitement there. There was an
and knowing that the possibility is there.
Possibility. She had made something, Yeah, she was so proud to have made this thing. And I think, stuff like that is just.
I think that's ultimately it, isn't it? It's demystifying this thing that seems impossible or unattainable or unreachable. It's showing an application of something that is accessible to them, and go, look, you can do this.
It's teaching
not
that,
beyond you.
Perfect is the enemy of good enough. You can strive for something, strive for perfection by all means, but once it's good enough, you can then choose whether you want to take it further and perfect it further, or if you move on to something else, and then potentially down the line you can mesh these two together and make something even better. And
breaking stereotypes. Yeah,
100%.
Not all scientists wear white coats. Yeah, scientists aren't old men with glasses and messy hair. Yeah,
occasionally
white men. Sometimes they are.
There's been a few.
I've known plenty. Yeah. Also known plenty of female scientists, people of color. Young people, old people. People forget. Like when Einstein came up with equals MC squared, he was 25, 26 years old. But our association with Einstein is that he's this white-haired, curly-haired, messy guy. Completely kind of doesn't got a clue what he's wearing.
ADHD and autism prevalent.
But he was 25, 26 when he came up with one of the most important things in physics. Right, we're approaching hour 50. I said sort of 90 minutes is kind of tops. Sort of LinkedIn earlier and kind of in our conversation.
We've waffled well past that.
Yes, there won't be any editing as
expected. I mean, as expected. To be fair, it was always going to happen, wasn't it? So
aim for 90 and get less than 2. That kind of works out fair, doesn't it? If I said 2, we'd be over 2.5. It's always the same. It has been a pleasure, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your input. I think as I mentioned earlier, we were very much just scratching the surface of this topic.
Completely. I think that's why there's a number 1 in the next gen up in the title there.
Yes, and there will be more. Obviously, we got, as I mentioned, next group chat is scheduled to be the Kids Invent Stuff group, and obviously we'll bring this, looking at their work, and it will no doubt hit this topic. Hopefully, I'm going to try and get tomorrow on at some point and talk about that. Yeah, we've got Soph. I've actually got a date booked for Soph now.
Oh, good.
I'm going to say that publicly. I'm going to say that publicly, not to sort of shame her or anything, but sort of say, there is I've got a date booked with Soph.
I mean, the first half hour is just going to be Welsh cakes, isn't it? So.
My tummy's just going to be rumbling while those two argue.
I'll send Welsh cakes out. We're going to be arguing. She loves my Welsh cakes. Yeah.
No, but techniques and who does it best and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's it. I think it's. I mean, obviously, Soap's been on our radar from day one.
Yes.
So it's nice that.
It'd be nice to get her on and chat. So there's a couple of other people I've got in mind as well that kind of will hit it as well. But we'll no doubt come back on.
We'll tease those more when they arrive. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not going to give everyone away, but
exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah. For people who want to find where they can find you, I would suggest they go back and listen to your respective episodes.
Agreed.
Because I don't think anything's changed on where people can find you. So, go back and look at the show notes on those, so we can wind up it earlier. So, once again, thank you very much, and bye, folks. We will see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers, Dave.